Hello everyone, I am Mike D'Angelo with That's Entertainment, and this is your retro review of Ghosts and Goblins by Capcom and Micronics. When you think of the hardest games ever released, your mind might move towards Dark Souls and Demon Souls, for these games are surely unforgiving as recent games go. However, back when the arcade was still king, Capcom and Konami ruled over the land with an iron fist. Like evil dictators, they mocked would-be heroes who stepped up to the cabinets. If you look back to those dark and cloudy days, Contra might very well be the first game that pops into your mind. Not far off, though, Ghosts and Goblins would trail behind. During the last retro review I went over, I talked about religious themes in gaming briefly. ActRaiser focused on the angelic presence of a deity you controlled. With Ghosts and Goblins, you see more of the opposite side of the spectrum. Devils and demons and beasts of mythology affront you in every leg of your journey, giving it a much darker feeling than Quintet's Super NES title. This is, in part, because Satan himself is the imposing baddie in Capcom's ridiculously hard platformer. For some reason, the Prince of Darkness decides to pull a Bowser and kidnaps the ill-named Princess Prin Prin while she's on a date with Sir Arthur. Faced with a massive case of blue balls, the knight sets off after the woman, across a world enveloped by evil. As is typically the case with NES games, the story never really expanded beyond the original motivation. You get a sense of what's happened in the world as you progress through the levels, but the game remains blissfully free of plot after Arthur heads after Satan. As I've previously indicated, Ghosts and Goblins is a very difficult game. These days, most releases have a very benevolent learning curve. Within 30 seconds of beginning the first level, Ghosts and Goblins introduces you to the Gargoyle, one hell of a bastard who is typically harder than most of the game's bosses, and most video game enemies in general. Of course, it doesn't help that Arthur can only survive 2 hits and very rarely finds a suit of replacement armor. You'd better get used to running around in your skivvies. There are several other foul beasties that constantly stand in your way as you progress through the various levels, including trolls, evil sprites, dragons, cyclopses, and these weird flying pigs in blankets that throw crap at you for hanging out in their woods. Not very welcoming at all. While the graphics for Ghosts and Goblins were somewhat crude, the levels were different enough to highlight the art team's work. Some of the bigger bosses had an opportunity to reveal more detail, but for most of the game, you're left trembling at the thought of the next enemy too much to truly appreciate the presentation. There are several moments where you're able to catch your breath in the levels, where you can see that the levels were a little redundant, even though they're different from the previous ones. The most powerful item in the game's potent arsenal is its sound. The music is catchy and addictive, although that might just be because it's haunted gamers that have failed in their quest for close to 30 years. Even the sound effects the enemies produce when they attack you can cause wizened old gamers to shake and quiver. If you think what I've told you so far about Ghosts and Goblins paints it as tame, think again. This is not one of those back in my day we had to go uphill to school both ways and we did it naked and we were happy stories. This game actively wants to punish you, and moreover, I'm convinced Capcom was trying to breed murderous rage out of its youthful adventurers. More likely, they were just trying to steal a few more quarters from those arcade dwellers who couldn't get the hint. You see, even after you've managed to beat the insurmountable odds the first time, you had to go through the world again, meeting certain criteria before you could manage to complete your quest. Ghosts and Goblins treated you like its bitch, and it did it without even a shrug. They weren't content to let it rear its ugly head on just one system either. Dozens of ports were released, as well as several sequels and spin-offs. Arthur has made several cameos over the years as well. Even though Ghosts and Goblins made you feel like an unwilling little spoon, there was something about the game that continuously wrenched you back to the controller. Unlike many games today that are able to reward you with decently written stories, the merit of your success in this classic was the thrill of victory itself. There was something about fighting your way past all the obstacles successfully that made all the toils you went through worth it. Yep, just me and my game genie.